Hello, time for a Man in Gray book review. Today's book is New Game, Volume 1, written and illustrated by Shotaro Tokuno and translated from Japanese by Jenny McKeon. It was published in 2018 by Seven Seas, and it's 144 pages. This is a manga about working in a video game company. The main character, Suzukatsu Aoba, is a young girl who's straight out of high school, and she immediately gets hired by this big video game company that produced one of her favorite games as a kid. So again, that doesn't seem like that's very realistic. When she gets to work, it turns out even though she's graduated from high school, she looks very young. She looks like she's in middle school, and so some of the other people that work there don't really take her seriously. They don't think she's mature enough to work for the company. She discovers that all the people she's going to work with in her team are all females, and they're all in their 20s. Again, that's not very realistic for a video game company. But one thing that is realistic is she discovers that all the characters, all the people that she works with, are all kind of eccentric. They all have little oddball tendencies, and that is realistic because if you've ever been around creative people, you know they don't act like accountants. And her boss is very tolerant of all these odd people because they do good work. One of the characters, for example, wanders around in her underwear and tends to sleep in her office. She only goes home every 2 or 3 days to change clothes and eat something, and then comes back, and she basically lives at work and has no social life because she's obsessed with programming this game. Suzukaki is assigned to the character modeling team, and her job, since she's a newbie, her job is to design some background characters for this village. Apparently this is a game where you wander through different towns and villages, and she has to create all these little background characters. But the game is supposed to come out in about 6 or 7 months, and they don't seem to be very far along. I mean, if the game is only going to be is less than a year away, you should have been through with all that by now. So again, that's something that's kind of puzzling. But she's kind of intimidated, but she's a talented illustrator. I mean, she basically isn't a computer expert. She's good at drawing things and creating characters, and that's what got her hired. And so she does a good job. She does all these characters, these background characters, and then she's assigned a higher status job. She has to create a minor character who's actually going to interact a little bit with the main characters. And so as we go through here, we learn kind of the ins and outs of a computer programming company. In addition to Suzukatsu's modeling team, there's also a special effects team, a motion team that specializes in the animation of the characters. There's also a background team that does the backgrounds for the game. And then there's a debugging team that works out the problems in the code. And then, of course, at the top, you have the planners who design the basic idea of the game, and programmers. So you learn a little bit about the structure of how video game companies work, and the fact that it's a big process. It involves hundreds of people, unlike the early days of video games where it was just a handful of people working on a very simple game. The complexities of games now require a giant team effort, and so it's broken down into a big organization. And so we learn a little bit about that as we go through here. The manga is done in an 8-panel style like this, kind of like traditional comic books. And so there's just a block of 8 small illustrations on each page usually. And so if you are new to mangas, I think that might make it actually easy to read because it's more similar to American comic books. So there's not any big splash panels or anything like that. But it also makes it visually less interesting because most of these panels, if you can see here, are just close-ups of the characters. And so you get page after page after page of just close-ups of people and dialogue. And so it's not very visually interesting to my take. But it's easier to read, I think. I keep putting this back side there. There we go. It's easier to read than some mangas if you're not familiar with it. But it's not as visually interesting, and it's because you're stuck with these little tiny boxes, you can't do very much visually there except just show the characters. So it's a interesting behind the scenes look at video games. There's not any real conflict. There's not much of a plot in the first volume. It's basically Takuno is just introducing the characters and kind of setting the background. So not a whole lot happens. There's no villain. There's not any real conflict. So it's in some ways it's not as interesting as some other other mangas, but it does give you a kind of an idea of what it's like to design video games and the intricacies involved and the process. So if you're interested in that, you might be interested in this book. So I think it's worth reading. It's not one of the better mangas that I've read, but it is worth reading, especially if you're really into video games and such as that. So the book is called New Game Volume 1. The author is Shotaro Kuno, and this has been another Man in Gray book review. Thanks for watching.